On today's episode of An Echo of Glory, we talk about the week at the club and take a trip down memory lane with Erik Edman and discuss that goal at Anfield.
And as usual, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Give us a rating as well wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to An Echo of Glory, the Tottenham Hotspur podcast that doesn't care what anybody says. This is the greatest club in England. Joining me as always, Gary Diamond.
Afternoon.
And Jake Robson.
Hello.
Right, straight in with that. Jake, I reckon I can see you're seething. You've got something to say about Pochettino.
Yeah. I mean, firstly, my view on this is it's great to have him back in England, or he's been in England, in the Premier League. I love it. He lays on a barbecue for all the staff at Chelsea. I'm looking at it going, I still love the man.
Oh,
what do we expect him to say? It's the great. This has been the greatest goal. If he turned up at Tottenham, I mean, I think everyone would laugh if he said that. If he turned up at Tottenham and said that, but you want, as the Chelsea manager,
you've got to say that.
What else is he going to say?
I said on Twitter, I think people expected him to turn up in a Spurs t-shirt with a tear in his eye. What's he going to say?
There you go. Exactly. I saw that tweet and I agreed with it wholeheartedly.
That's rare.
Sorry, I didn't reply. No, I always agree. I often agree with what you say, and I also think he's a man. Firstly, we all know he's very clever. He's clued up. He's smart. Having come from Argentina, where rivalries are huge, aren't they? But Intercity and this kind of thing. And then obviously in Spain, he knows what rivalries are. He knows what he was doing. And he knows that it's going to endear him to the fans of that club. Why should he say anything less? Why should he say, oh, yeah, at Tottenham, we all hated Chelsea? I mean, what do people expect him to say?
Gary,
and these are probably, I know how this works. These are probably the same people that wanted him out at Tottenham way back when anyway. So I just don't even believe that people are that bothered about it.
Gary, have you burnt your Poch pyjamas, finally?
I was I was sort of towards the end of his tenure. I was a bit Poch out anyway because I thought it was going the wrong way. I thought the Champions League final papered over quite a few cracks that had been going on previous, and then it didn't start particularly well in the season after, and it was all a terrible shame the way it ended. The reality of it is we haven't. Spurs didn't approach him. Obviously, our dealers as good as said that he was waiting for the phone call. It didn't ring.
Yep.
That's our decision. I don't think you can blame Pochettino for going to Chelsea and wanting to endear himself to the fans. I think he's got
lives in London.
He's got a hell of a challenge there. I'm a little bit sort of there's been a lot of talk about I'm going to boo him now when he comes back to Tottenham. I think it's October or November when we play.
Get on with the game. I'm not going to boo him or cheer him.
My view is Chelsea comes to Spurs. It's always a big game, and I'll boo Chelsea, and he's a part of Chelsea. So it's just I hate Chelsea and anything associated with him, but it's nothing to do with him personally at this point. Yeah. And I think I think we need to get past the thought that we're seeing it with Harry Kane at the moment. We need to get past the thought that footballers or managers or whatever are affiliated to football clubs in the way that we are.
They have careers and lives.
It's a job for them, and Pochettino isn't going to say, I dedicate myself to Tottenham whether they want me or not. You just got to get on with it.
And let's say for one rose-tinted minute that he bled Tottenham, and they fired him. At the end of the day, so what can you expect?
What's he got to sit waiting? His next job has to be Tottenham. It's never going to happen.
Absolutely.
I'm going to come back to you, Gary, because we couldn't get hold of Lily White Rose this week. So you are our youth team correspondent, and you got a bit of news.
Yeah, so there has been some youth team updates this week. Mikey Moore officially signed his contract. We knew that was pending, but that's officially happened. And then two other youth players have signed this week. Niall John with a 2-year contract and Matthew Craig with a 3-year contract. I got in touch with John Lily White Rose just to ask him his thoughts and feelings on this. And he felt that it was an interesting one in particular with Niall John because he hasn't been in the best form of late. A player with a lot of potential, but he needs to step up, and that could be the reason for the 2-year contract. The other interesting point that John made was that both Niall John and Matthew Craig share the same agent as Romain Mundle. Now, we offered Romain Mundle a 5-year contract versus a 3-year contract and a 2-year contract for these players.
Yep.
So I think we can put to bed finally that this is anything to do with the agents or anything like that. This was Mundle wanting to leave and has ended up at a mid-table Belgian team. That's what he wants to do. Good luck to him.
Standard liaison.
But hopefully Niall, John and Craig go on to bigger things at Spurs.
Okay, thank you for that roundup.
That's good stuff.
It's like the youth team desk over
Absolutely.
here.
That's great.
Little niche.
Yeah.
Little bit of other news. Not a youth team player anymore, but Ollie Skip has reached the under-21 final with England. They'll play Spain on Saturday night, I think it is. He's been a sub, come off the bench for most of the games. That's good to see. First team news, talk of Manor Solomon having a medical today. Played at Fulham, Israeli international, a winger. We'd imagine he's the replacement for Mora and Danjuma. I think he's a really good player. I've seen this week's Titter? that was something else.
Luckily, you're allowed to say this. Say that on this.
Twitter gripe was that we've pillaged Shakhtar for a player for free, and we shouldn't be doing that. It wasn't our problem. FIFA ruled that the Shakhtar players could leave for free. We've given Shakhtar a pre-season friendly, which is going to happen early August. But aside from that, that sounds like news to you.
Well, no, I hadn't. No, I knew he came from Shakhtar.
Yeah.
But well, what's happening over in Shakhtar in Ukraine? No, that's not news to me.
No, but I
didn't see that.
Yeah, so their players
complaining that we.
Well, it's more than that. It's the ongoing argument that there's a feeling at the minute that we're taking the cheap options, and this feeds into that narrative, I think.
People love to any chance. I mean, what if a player's actually good, but he happens to also be free?
Yeah.
Is that not allowed as well?
Correct.
I mean, did anybody not see the second half? He was basically the Kulusevski of this season that we signed in. He was amazing, wasn't he, this season when Fulham signed him?
I think this is the thing, isn't it? There's no doubt that we need a big clear out, but we also need a lot of players in. And as much as we'd all love for all 7 players that we bring in to be 50, 60, 70 million players, that's just not going to happen, right? So we have to, if you've got the opportunity of somebody like Manor Solomon, who he's not going to get in the team ahead of Kulusevski or Son, you're unlikely to find somebody that's going to get in the team ahead of Kulusevski or Son. This is about squad depth, and do you really want to be spending big money in those sorts of areas? This is a no-lose transfer for me, where he can turn out to be a really, really good, decent player, and worst case scenario, he's not, then we sell him in a season or two for 10, 15 million. And there you go. But I think he will be a good player. I think he'll be somebody that can come on 70 minutes, got blistering pace, can take the ball past players, has got a shot on him. In the high-tempo sort of game that Postecoglou wants to play, I think it's a canny signing, to be honest.
And the experience that he has in the Premier League is off the bench, which is more or less what you're saying. So we've basically signed somebody perfect for the role that we actually need him for. The fact that he's free is neither here nor there. I mean, obviously you want the club to be... Well, the thing is, do you necessarily want the club to be spending lots of money? You want the club to be buying players wisely and correctly.
Correct.
And if it means that somebody happens to be at the end of their contract and is on... Someone may well get Harry Kane for free next summer. There's not going to be any accusations of that club of they've cheaped out on him.
You're seeing things like, they've spent 105 million on Rice and we've only spent 40 million on Maddison. Why the comparison?
Because everybody just loves to beat the club. I don't know if it's necessarily a Tottenham thing. I think people just like to have a moan and say that they're not doing it in the way that I want them to be doing it. And at the end of the day, just one thing on this. I've always thought, and I don't know, I've said this before, Leicester did it 5 or 6 years ago. Brighton are now doing it. You don't necessarily have to pay big money for good players. There are enough YouTube videos and the technology is there to watch players all over the world. I'd actually rather sometimes, I think in this day and age as well, more so than maybe 10 or 15 years ago, if you sign somebody that you've never heard of, sometimes you look at Brighton.
Look at Mitoma.
Look at Enciso. Look at McAllister. McAllister's now gone to Liverpool. I think now more than ever, I think we should be a lot more patient with players.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either you've never heard of or B, don't cost very much money.
But interestingly, I read a report about Manchester United's goalkeeper search this week, having got rid of De Gea. Now, the first thing to say is I'm not seeing any links to David Raya for 40 million. And in fact, the keeper that they wanted, their number one keeper, is allegedly Onana. But the report that I was reading was that they are not going to go for Onana because he is deemed too expensive. So the words were they are going to go for a cheaper option. United.
It's life. This is the way it is. If you haven't got it's just United. Yeah. If you haven't got the money, you don't spend it. And if there's viable options out there, like Maddison, 40 million, Solomon, nothing.
Vicario,
hopefully we don't know.
We don't know. Well, but highly rated. Listen, if it turns out to be an utter horror show, then people can say, we got it wrong, we should have spent money. But actually, if Vicario lives up to reputation,
brilliant,
fantastic, you can't have any complaints. I think where people are getting their knickers in a twist at the moment, really, is with the centre-back issue.
Well, yeah, I was going to come on to that. We've done
Look at that. Seamless.
Seamless. We've done
Seamless.
He can read me like a book. We've done Maddison, potentially Solomon. So with the forward areas getting sorted, Kulusevski permanent. Still, the defence is the same. It's the same defence as last season, and it was shit. Let's be honest, right? We've got to sort that out. Links with Van der Veen from Wolfsburg, Tapsoba also in Germany.
Again, Van der Veen. I've never heard of the guy. But the fact of the matter is, he may well be really good in this day and age.
He looks very good.
He looks very good.
Yeah.
And also, as we sort of said in the past, if you're going to get behind the new manager, you have to get behind whoever we sign, because I'm not going to sit here. You can't be naive. He's got to have something to do with the players that are coming in, because I don't think...
Well, unlike the last manager who claimed club signings.
Yeah, but, and actually, though, I'm pretty sure he was quite happy with a lot of those signings, Conte. I get the whole...
You think he barely played half of them?
Well, the ones...
Look at Basuma. I've seen Basuma... Sorry to interrupt, Jake, but I've seen Basuma walk into training. They didn't. I think another video today. Adam Nathan said this on Twitter. He looks like a leader, a happy person. How could you not have played Basuma? I know we've talked about this. What the fuck was going on last season?
There's been a lot of talk about the body language. We're all body language experts, aren't we? I had a bit of a rant on Twitter as well, because I was actually comparing the attitude of Basuma in some of the videos to that of Ndombele, who just doesn't impress me with how he comes across in any video ever. I mean, there was even what do you call them? A rodon, the training
Rondo.
There was even a rondo, and they're all zipping it about and passing it about, and Ndombele stood there on what looks like the sort of baseline area, and his two passes were just so weak and nonchalant. But Postecoglou's come out and said he wants this guy here, and look, I think that's something that you can understand, because as we said last week,
talented,
he's a game changer for me. He is a better technical player, more ability than James Maddison, Benton Cook. He is
whoa. No, nothing on Benton Cook.
If you could get Ndombele reaching 70% even of his overall ability and potential, you've got a game-changing player. I don't have faith that will happen, but I can understand Postecoglou wanting it to happen.
Going back to the defensive thing, we've talked about cheap options. The argument with the goalkeeper, he was the cheap option. You've got to be very careful with your back four, your back five, whatever it is. At the moment, like I said, it's still the same defence. We will sort it out, but it's got to be done, and it's got to be done very, very carefully, because for all this attacking football that we're going to play, we've got to keep the back door closed. It's so important.
And this is where, going back to what we were discussing earlier about the spend, this is where I think people are getting upset, because the defence is probably the critical area and the part of the team that needs most revamping. We're already pretty nervous about the fullback areas and the inverted fullbacks, and can our fullbacks play it? So we've got to get it right. We've got to get it right at centre back. And I think what people are getting upset about is that they want Van der Ven and Tapsoba, where it looks like it's Van der Ven and Tosin, or Tapsoba and Longley. I mean, look, I don't know why I have a feeling towards Van der Ven and Tosin.
He looks like a beast, Van der Ven, doesn't he?
Yeah, and this is the thing. He's rapid as hell, and if we're going to be playing that high line, then you need that pace. He's naturally left-footed. Apparently, he can play sort of left back as well as that.
Oh, we need more left backs.
Well, but it just gives us that option, particularly if Sessegnon goes. But yeah, I don't disagree with the argument that actually why not Van der Ven and Tapsoba? Let's do it. Let's get our defence sorted for the next 5-6 years and go big on it and get it done. I don't disagree with that argument at all if it's there to be done.
Is the Twitter sphere nonplussed by Tosin?
I don't think it's about Tosin. I think it is about them wanting Van der Ven and Tapsoba.
It's always cooler to sign from abroad, though, right?
But the thing is, this is the problem, and I actually think, maybe. But firstly, if you've heard of them, and secondly, what about the Premier League experience?
100%, and he's homegrown.
I've always thought this. I think, okay, we've signed a goalkeeper from Italy, who it turns out, according to Patrick that we had a few weeks ago, was the best goalkeeper in Italy last year. Fine, I'll stand corrected on that. But I think with centre backs and with strikers, I think they're the most important ones, because I think if you miss the goal as a striker, that's what you're judged on, and if you make mistakes at the back, you can end up costing your side goals. And I think the Premier League experience often should come before almost anything else, especially with a young player as well, because you know how firstly how tough it can be for players to move, just move clubs and settle in, let alone move countries for a young player and adapt to the Premier League. When you're young and your mistakes are that much more glaringly obvious, I think anybody that thinks that, I think needs to have a rethink. Especially as Tosin has been a good player.
Well, this is what I was going to ask you. I don't want to throw you a curveball here, Jake.
Throw me a curveball.
And I don't want to have you down as our Fulham expert, but something in my head tells me you've done a
my
lot.
dad's team.
Right, okay, they're your dad's team. I feel like you've seen a bit of Fulham recently. Has Tosin registered in your brain? Can you talk to us about him?
I haven't seen that much of Fulham recently.
Right.
No, I have. Yeah. Well, so the season I don't remember when he got into their team regularly, but him and Anderson were the Anderson that is now at Crystal Palace were the centre back pairing. Anderson then obviously moved on to Crystal Palace because he was very good and was kind of plucked out there. And Tosin is the one that stayed behind. And look at how Fulham played this season. I'm trying to remember who his centre back partner was at Fulham. That's escaped me. But the pair of them, I mean, the season that Fulham had, I mean, look at Solomon, for example. We're now signing, actually, there's a lot of players. Some of their more attacking players are a bit weaker, but their midfield and defence, I think you could do a lot worse than looking at a couple of their guys. I mean, not that we're going to go back in for any of the others. Anthony Robinson, their left back, was good. Their goalkeeper, obviously Bernd Leno, had a good season. Yeah, I mean, Marco Silva got them defending pretty well. Okay,
so hopefully that gets sorted. There is a big elephant standing in this room again, and it's Harry Kane.
Is he here?
He's still on holiday, apparently. That's not stopped Thomas Tuchel going around his house.
It's a bit creepy, that, isn't it?
Kane sees him on the Ring doorbell. Thomas, I'm away, mate. Leave me alone. We don't know if that's true. If he has gone, see him, whatever. It just brings it round again.
I just don't believe that's even true. But
Gary, now you've got a view on this as well. You think someone's using Bayern as a stalking horse? Us, Tottenham, who?
I don't think there's any coincidence that the only team that would make sense for him to be linked to this summer would be Bayern. Real Madrid are clearly keeping their powder dry for Mbappe next year. I mean, that just looks to be the case. Bayern Munich haven't got another 100 levers to pull. He's not going to any Italian
like
club.
Willy Wonka.
Yeah, all these financial levers. He's not going to any Italian clubs. They couldn't possibly afford him. United are in the midst of a takeover, and he's not going to City. So it kind of leaves Bayern Munich by default. Now, it strikes me that why would Kane rule that out? Why would he not look at them as a bit of a stalking horse for potential market value and so on and so forth? And, off the back of it, suddenly we've got rumours of a £450,000 a week contract being slapped down to Kane by Daniel Levy. So it doesn't make sense to me that Harry Kane would go to Bayern Munich, clearly not for the ambition of winning the Bundesliga, but to win the Champions League. I don't see Bayern Munich as a team that is a shoo-in to win the Champions League over the next 3 or 4 years in any event. So
he would certainly help them.
Of course he would, but you've still got to get past City and Madrid and so on. I don't see it, and I don't see how, with his wife heavily pregnant with their 4th child, they're not going out to Bavaria.
I refuse to believe they're going. It's
easy
for him to travel to and from.
Yeah, but I mean, I just don't see it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think a lot of this is driven
but at the same time, we've talked about players not having the same beliefs that we do as fans. I'm starting to wonder whether I just not thinking too much of Kane's wrong, but he's been here so long. Like, he has one career. He's done us a favour by still being here, effectively. I don't know. I know he could wait another year and have the pick of all his teams. I worry there's some real truth in this.
I'm sure there is truth in it, and I'm sure that he has been speaking, or representatives of his have been speaking with Bayern, but I don't know how much. Listen, I could be, eating my hat and drinking my tears in a couple of weeks, but I don't know. I don't know how. I suspect it is just a little bit more of let's string them along, let's use them. I can't see that Harry Kane is going, I desperately want to go and play for Bayern Munich. It doesn't make sense to me. But I could be wrong with that. I think there's a lot of it as well with the media coming out from Germany. Somebody made a great point that they're not used to not getting the players that they want. They cherry pick all of the best German players from across the German clubs, and without fail those players want to go there, and without fail those clubs sell to Munich. I'm not quite sure why. But that's the way it seems to go. So it's a bit of a closed shop league, but they're just simply not used to a player or a club saying no to them. And in a lot of this reporting, I find there to be a fair amount of arrogance from the fans and the comments from the fans on Twitter and the club itself that Harry Kane only wants Bayern Munich. Come on now. Come on, that ain't true. He wanted City a couple of seasons ago, so it's not only Bayern Munich. Only Bayern Munich are available right now. Let's get real.
So that's Gary's rant for this week. What are your thoughts? You talk a lot of sense. I'm just a little bit worried about it.
I think the main reason a lot of those clubs sell is because they need the money. Now, despite what a lot of Tottenham fans may think, Tottenham aren't going to be bullied into selling any of their players on the cheap, because ultimately they're still one of the most financially well-off clubs in the world. And Daniel Levy is chucking Daniel Levy into that, and he's not going to sell any of his players on the cheap. The fact of the matter is, I agree with you, and I think actually I think they're doing it. I think if it's true, I think it's being done to try and appease the fans after basically the fiasco that has happened with Sadio Mane this season. He was meant to be the kind of replacement to Robert Lewandowski, if you like, maybe not in position on the field, but in terms of marquee signing. He's fallen out with Leroy Sané. It's basically all gone tits up, that signing. So they need to try and do something to appease the fans. Now,
even if they do it, or are they just showing that they're trying to do something?
Exactly. That's why they've made if that offer was true, derisory, what was it, 80 million euros, 70 million euros, how many pounds is that? It's just ridiculous.
But there is something I'd like to raise, and just want to throw it out there. It struck me as odd that the reports have been that Tuchel has spoken directly to Harry Kane, which sounds like what I used to know to be tapping up. I understand that these days it's done between intermediaries. But then again, apparently Van de Ven has spoken to Postecoglou. So how does it work exactly?
I couldn't tell you.
Firstly, is it true? Exactly, that's your point. Secondly, it happens, doesn't it? When someone does a business deal, right? If there may be two or three buyers for a product, you're allowed to speak to two or three different people, and everybody's allowed to know that you may be speaking to other people. It's fine if Harry Kane wants to speak to another club. It doesn't mean that he's going to leave at the end of the day, and also it doesn't mean that he necessarily wants to leave. If Bayern want to speak to him, he's allowed to listen.
Of course.
This is the thing that no one really knows. So it's just all conjecture at the end of the day. And I think a lot of it is hyped up because it makes for good newspaper sales, it makes for good tweets, it makes for good, hours of radio. And there's like a narrative that kind of gets built back. And because we have Twitter, the narrative can go back and forth, 2 or 3 times in a day almost, and it makes it seem like you're watching a show on TV. And I don't think it actually works out that way. I don't think it moves as quickly as Twitter and the kind of media would have you believe.
I think what's hurting me a little bit at the moment with this saga is, at the back end of last season, we spoke even on this pod about the language that Harry Kane was employing when speaking about Tottenham versus when he was angling for the move to City. And it was very different. The language that he was using on the golf course to Gary Neville and everything throughout that summer was very different to how it felt at the back end of last season. This is what's hurt me. There was a lot of us.
He was talking like a captain because he was going to be the captain.
Exactly that. He was talking about the captain. We're going to talk about the vision of the club, and where we go and all of this sort of thing. And I think we were all sat here sort of believing, he's going to commit himself, and it makes sense for him to commit himself. And that's why this sort of feeling of all the rumours around Bayern Munich at the minute feels so much more destabilising than perhaps it otherwise would have been.
I agree.
One of the things I read, one of my mates sent me, who's an Arsenal fan. He said, "Oh, so Kane's off." I said, "What do you mean?"
Well, we've been hearing that for 5 years.
He sent me, he sent me something that he'd seen on Twitter from one of the. He actually based in Germany, my mate, and one of the German newspapers. And it was something along the lines of Kane could be open to talking to Bayern. It's just Well, I said to him, well, what does that say? Yeah. He says it could be. I was like, could be open. Yeah. So Kane might want to talk. It's just that's the thing. A lot of it.
Journalism.
There you go. So,
right. Any other business?
Not
gentlemen?
for me, Clive.
Not for you, Clive. Any other business?
Well, the players are back training, which is a development from last week. Yeah. And apparently
they're doing their job.
You mean we're a week closer to the start of the season?
But by all accounts, the reports are a lot of positivity and so on and so forth. The internationals aren't back yet. I think that happens next week. Yeah. And it is frightening close to the time when we fly out for pre-season friendlies. It almost feels like the summer is gone and we're off again, doesn't it? It just feels, I don't know, like I was looking forward to a long summer and don't even feel like we've had a summer. There's been so much going on.
Go 3-0 down to Australia, the summer's over.
Weeks. But also, it made me realise, actually, I know they're very, very well paid footballers. Don't get long off, really, do they?
Well,
no, but
a month. I mean, about a month, 5-6 weeks by the time. And what about the guys that played internationals as well? I mean, they get an extra week, but they were playing 3 weeks ago.
well, they're just doing their job, Jake.
Just doing their job. Yeah.
Right.
I know, but
Right. Enough about this. Enough of that. Should we take a trip down memory lane? I think
do it.
we've talked about doing a little series, one game or one goal, and we'd all love to play once for Spurs. Some people have been lucky enough to play hundreds of times, some lucky to play just once, and we're going to try and talk to some of those over the summer and over the season going forward. Some people have scored one goal for the club. I assume you remember a goal away at Anfield, 2004, Erik Edman getting the ball 40 yards out, striking it into the top corner. You remember that?
yeah, I mean, how can you forget that? There's certain goals, aren't there? There's certain goals that will, they just burn into your memory and they're always there. And it was one of those where he gets it and you can see him winding it up. You're like, don't shoot. And he did. And you're like, okay.
Don't shoot. I remember that don't shoot, actually. Carl Walker against Arsenal. I was sat in the East Stand. So I never used to sit there, but I happened to be sat in the East Stand right behind it. And I shouted, don't shoot. Anyway, sticks it in the corner. That was probably very much a don't shoot. The best person to talk about the Erik Edman goal against Liverpool is Erik Edman. And we're going to talk to him now. Erik, thanks so much for joining us. As part of our one goal, one game series, we're going to come on to that goal at Anfield shortly, of course. But let's go straight back to July 2004. You'd had 3 seasons in Holland at Heerenveen, finishing 4th twice. Did you know of interest of Tottenham in that summer? Were there any other clubs? How did the deal happen?
I have to go back a long time to get those memories. I had a pretty good European Championship with Sweden in Portugal. I think the French coach Jacques Santini was going for Vicente Lizarazu. He turned the offer down from Spurs, and then I think what I heard at least, Frank asked Martin Jol, who's the best left back in the Dutch league?
Yeah,
and he said Maxwell. Okay, that guy, we can't get that one guy. But who's the second best? And then he turned to me, and it went from there. Eventually, it was a quick deal, and I was delighted to go to Spurs, obviously.
Yeah. So you made your debut at home to Liverpool. More on them later. Just to take your trip down memory lane, the team that day was Robinson in goal, Eiffel, Naybet, King, Edman at left back, Redknapp, Mendes, Davis, Johnny Jackson, another left footer, Canute and Defoe. Any memories from that day, the debut against Liverpool?
I remember I was really nervous before the game, going into the game, and obviously for me as a Swedish, as a Swede, it's a big thing. Premiership it's huge in Sweden over here, so it's everybody back home was watching the game, and I think it was a draw, wasn't it? 1-1 or
1-1 draw. Yeah.
Defoe scored,
Defoe
I think.
Scored, and Cisse just signed for Liverpool, scored for them.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. But it was a big game for me, obviously, playing with great players and against big players. So nice memory.
Erik, it's a really interesting time for me when you joined Tottenham, because I see that period of time, those few years under Martin Jol, as being the beginning of the modern day revolution at Spurs, with Martin Jol as, I call him, the godfather of modern day Tottenham. When you arrived, it was obviously Jacques Santini who was manager. Did it feel as though Santini was manager, or did it feel as though Jol was always going to come through and become the manager? Because Santini only lasted 10, 11 games or so.
I can't remember. I think he came in with the long-term view of things, Jacques Santini, but I think it ended up with Frank Arneson and him not agreeing on things, and Martin took over when he left, and so obviously Martin came in with a view to be head coach, obviously, I think, but that as a player you didn't really see that coming, as I recall it anyway.
Nobody really remembers the 13 games under Santini. It's a real blur for us as fans as well.
Yeah,
I was just wondering, actually, I wanted to ask you about the derbies that you played in, but just something that you said there. what's it like then when you sort of turn up at a club thinking, well, with one manager, and then 2 months later, maybe it didn't turn out or did turn out well with you and Martin, but what's it like for a player to turn up there and all of a sudden the guy that you've essentially gone to play for is then gone after 2 months? How do you kind of deal with that?
For me, I was having my hands full with just keeping my head above the water, because it's a big step for me coming from Holland to the Premiership. So whether Jacques Santini or Martin Jol was the head coach, that didn't really, I would not say matter, but it didn't bother me in any way. I liked Martin, I liked Jacques as well. For me, it was the crucial thing was to compete for a starting spot,
Okay, then I'll ask you about the derbies. Obviously, you'd have played against Arsenal, the North London derby, but you, of course, played in some big derbies in Sweden. How did the North London derby kind of compare to those ones that you played in Sweden?
Sweden, actually, the fans' culture in the Stockholm derby, it's great. It's a international atmosphere with a lot of people in the stands, but you can't really compare to the rivalry Tottenham had against Arsenal. I would say, it was a huge game. I was just coming back from a head concussion. It was my first game actually. And then in the warm-up, Nordin Nibet, he strikes a ball in my head. So I was maybe I should not play this game, But it turned out okay, but we lost 5-4 if you remember that one at the Lane.
9 different scorers.
Yeah, unbelievable game. So I think for the objective viewer, it was quite a nice game to watch, but we lost it towards the end. It was a big game, but obviously we wanted another result.
Yeah, so we lost that game. We started the season quite well, to be honest, but then we lost to United, we lost to Arsenal. Season went on up and down as it did at that time. We got knocked out of the FA Cup. But then we come to the 16th of April 2005, Erik, and this is a goal that goes down in Tottenham folklore. You mentioned the name Erik Edman. Even non-Spurs fans go, that goal against Liverpool at Anfield. So we got a corner. We took a short corner, we messed it up. Andy Reid got tackled, and the ball dropped to you 40 yards out. Now, what are you thinking at this point? I noticed doing the research, you'd scored a couple of weeks before for Sweden, I think against Bulgaria. You were in goal-scoring mode at that point. What made you shoot from over 40 yards?
Yeah, as I recall it, Robbie was screaming for the ball.
Just so we've got it on our screen here, if you can see it.
Yeah, I got it far back, and I was thinking, okay, let's don't get a counter on this one, and then I was just blasted it. I remember Robbie Keane was screaming for the ball, but eventually he saw it ended up in the net, so I think he as well was pretty happy. He didn't receive it that time.
I actually also noticed, I think it was the last goal you ever scored, and for that to be one of the few goals you scored, it's a great goal to dine out on.
Yeah. If you have one goal in your career, it's a pretty nice one, I have to admit. Yeah.
So we went on to draw that game 2-2. Actually, it was one of the last games you actually played for the club. What happened towards the end of that season? Were you in and out of the team? You then started the next season, but before the window closed, you'd moved on. What happened there?
What happened? Me and Timothy was competing for the starting spot as left back, and I really enjoyed seeing him play. And I recall when I asked Martin about it, he said, "At home games, I want us to be the controlling team, and then Timothy is better offensively, and away games you are better defensively." So I think that's a little bit how he thought about it. And then Timothy went. I think he went to Hamburg or something, and then they took young Pioli in. It was 1 year towards to the World Cup in Germany. I wanted to play regularly, and I got the feeling young Pioli was supposed to be the starting left back, and I took the decision last day of the transfer window to move. I had a couple of inquiries and offers before that, but Rennes was a good step for me as well. Obviously, it's not the Premiership and it's not Tottenham, but it's a great club as well.
And Erik, a couple of years later, you found your way back to English football with Wigan.
Sorry about this, Erik.
I have to ask.
You promised not to drag this one out.
I have to ask. You came back to the lane. Maybe not
Yes.
as happy memories. You played in one of the most infamous games of recent times in the 9-1. What's your memories of that?
I still dream. I have nightmares about Aaron Lennon running around me like Bugs Bunny or something. No, but obviously it's a really, really bad day for me and for the team. And now I can smile about it and joke about it. But it was not so funny the days after the game. That's for sure.
Sorry.
Just so after that, your career sort of wound down. I was looking at your career: 57 caps, 1 goal for Sweden. You played, like you said, at Euro 2004. I remember that famous game against Denmark, which knocked out Italy. 2006 World Cup, you played every minute. Looking back on your career and your time at Tottenham, sum up your career if you can in a few words.
No, but obviously the highlight of my career was that season at Spurs. To play at the Lane, the White Hart Lane is a fantastic arena and the stadium and the atmosphere around the games. And obviously it's a big club in England and with a history. Like you said before, it was a little bit of a rebuilding year with a lot of young players coming in. Carrick, obviously Ledley was there. Up front we had quality. Canoté was a great player, although he went to Sevilla and had a great couple of years there. Robbie, Jermaine, and Mido as well was a great player at that time. And so I think we had a lot of good players.
What was Mido like? A bit of a character.
Yeah, that's definitely a character, that's for sure. I've played with him at Wigan as well, and I think, I think he a little bit, he wasn't persistent in his way of dealing with things, but talent-wise, he was outstanding, and the things he could do for your team when he was fit enough to play was really, really high level.
And what are you up to now? Do you do much in football, or do you kind of just watching football now?
I'm coaching a little bit, and I'm doing commentating for Swedish television. That's mainly what I do these days. I've been doing it for a couple of years as well. So I have the luxury to a little bit spend my day as I want, and I'm enjoying time with my family and enjoy watching football regularly.
Absolutely. We've got to ask you also about a big Tottenham star, big player that we all really love, Kulusevski, who obviously came a season and a half ago. How's he viewed then in Sweden? Because he came to Tottenham and he was fantastic for the first half a season that we had him. Him and a few others seemed to struggle a bit last season in a team that didn't do very well. So some of the fans are now maybe thinking, are they a bit unsure about him? How's he kind of viewed in Sweden?
At the moment, we have Alexander Isak and Kulusevski. They are the two biggest players. They are still young. I hope with the confidence from the new coach, he can build his career at Spurs. And I think the transfer you took, deciding to take him permanently, is a good decision. And I really enjoy watching him, and I think it's one for the future. Just give him some time and confidence, and he will repay that trust and confidence.
Just finally for me, Erik, Tottenham have always been quite a popular team in Scandinavia, and over the years Liverpool and United and City have grown and grown. Are we still a big deal over there?
I think Liverpool is the biggest club in Scandinavia and in Sweden. But apart from that, I see also in Helsingborg, I see a lot of people coming with caps and shirts, Spurs shirts and Spurs memorabilia and stuff. They bought over there. So a lot of people in Sweden. Tottenham is their favorite team, and we also have a Swedish fan base and so it's a huge club in Sweden still, but you need to win something soon, otherwise people will go for another team.
We talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot. Erik, thanks for coming on. As I say, you can't mention the name Erik Edman without someone going, oh yeah, that goal against Liverpool, I remember it, whoever they support. And I hope you've enjoyed taking a trip down memory lane, and it was really great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Erik. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
great to take that trip down memory lane with Erik. But Gary, I wanted to pick up on something you said about Yol being the godfather of that era. I remember we played Everton in about October, just before Santini left. We won 1-0 and Pamero scored. I was actually in the home end that day.
Is that a corner? A flick on from a corner?
Yeah, it was a header from a corner. And there was a bit of a set to at one point on the touchline. Some of the players got into handbags on the touchline, and Yol stepped in.
Yeah, and he
pulled players apart, and I can't remember who the Everton manager was, probably Moyes at the time. And it was kicking off, and Yol was just stood there. And I remember saying to a friend of ours, Ollie, I think that guy's our next manager. He looks more than...
That was before
Santini left.
Oh, okay.
And I just felt that he was the man, and I think you felt the same.
Who knows? I mean, it was a question that I was desperate to ask Erik and see if he had any insight too. But I guess, from a player's point of view, it's natural they're just getting their head down and doing the job, and they ignore any of the sort of noise around it. But I just remember that summer, and it was a protracted, drawn-out management search. We're used to those. I think that was Levy's first big protracted management search, and there was a lot of noise and criticism aimed at him that he couldn't get a top manager. And we'd heard about the name of Martin Jol linked to Tottenham. And it felt underwhelming because he was an unknown, whereas Jacques Santini at the time was a very up-and-coming he was rated as the top manager in France.
He just took France to a Euro quarter-final.
And he was rated as the top manager in France and so on. And then, again, this could be 2 plus 2 making 5, but it felt to me like Santini was the vanity hire with the plan that
So today's Conte, the similar...
Yeah, like can't exactly like that sort of thing. But at the time, Martin Jol was brought in, and it always felt like Martin Jol was going to be the man. And I just wondered if the players got a sense of that or not. But Martin Jol for me definitely was the godfather. I love big Martin Jol, and that was the time for me when Spurs regained credibility and pride in the way that we played. The results we weren't a soft touch anymore. We brought in. We were talking about whether we do a series of unsung heroes. One of mine is Palacios, because he came in as our first sort of hard man central midfielder and kind of epitomised. Wasn't the best, wasn't brilliant, but actually underpinned. We ain't going to get beat here and get stuck in, and that was Martin Jol. And the other touchline fracas I remember with Martin Jol was obviously the famous one.
Wenger.
With Wenger. So I'd forgotten about the Everton one. Thank you for reminding me. But that was the one that I had in my mind. And he stood up to Wenger, who was a big figure in the game, obviously, at that time. And I think Wenger shit himself as well.
I was going to say, I take Jol in that fight.
Yeah.
My mate actually named his cat after Wilson Palacios.
Great name for
Well, I'd named my cat after Teddy Sheringham.
There you go.
We had Ozzy after Ozzy Ardiles.
Right.
My dad's dog is called Ledley.
Had to go Dixie for Dixie Dean, as my wife is an Everton fan. They're no longer with us. The wife is. The cat's no longer with us.
No, about Everton going down.
They're still with us.
They're
still with us.
Yeah.
Teddy, I think the office dog here is Teddy. I would assume the podcast studio dog.
No way to speak about James.
And I wasn't going to throw to you about pets, Jake. I was going to throw to you about memories from that time. Do you agree with Gary that it was start of the beginning of... I know nothing, we won a League Cup. That was it. But did you feel like it was the beginning of the end of the shit?
Yeah, and actually, I almost remember aside from the cup win under Ramos, I remember the Jol period a bit more fondly than the Ramos period, to be honest. Because it was the beginning of the next phase. What a rough hand that Jol got dealt at the end, when basically he knew
sacked at half
he knew
time.
He was going to be out to be replaced by somebody. Okay, he had credentials, obviously, Ramos, but having kind of taken us up a level.
I have a quick story about this,
Sure.
where I feel in part responsible for the sacking of Martin Jol. True story, this. So I went to an evening with Martin Jol, and I asked questions. So I put up my hand, and he's pointed at me and said, "What would you like to ask?" And I said, "Martin, look, I love you, love everything you've done for the club, but I have to be honest with you. Every time we have a set piece against us at the minute, I shit myself because it looks like the opposition's going to score. And he went, every time we have a set piece against us, I shit myself too. Now,
he was manager at the time?
No, he was manager at the time.
I thought you meant recently.
No, he was manager at the time.
Oh,
he was still manager. He said, every time we get a set piece against us, I shit myself too.
Where was he from?
And he went, anyway, he went on to talk about the training that they do and Anthony Gardner and so on at the time. I think unbeknown to anybody, there was a reporter in the room, which was a bit dark, and the comment of him shitting himself when there was a set piece made, I think, one of the local newspapers, and it was only weeks after that he got sacked. And to this day, I feel guilty.
You should
get out.
Yeah,
but you're right. It was the first time for a while that we'd had fun football, and I feel like we're going to get that again under Ange. So hopefully this is another rebirth. Like I said, great to chat to Erik. Erik, it was a time where, like he said, he wasn't there that long. But isn't it great for him to, like I said to him a couple of times, to be that man where someone mentions his name and they go, "Oh God, I remember that goal."
That's literally what happens, because it's like because not only was it his main moment at the club, but it's also actually, you go over the years. I mean, we've scored some good goals, but there aren't many that are gonna top that. I mean, you really got to rack your brains to think.
Wanyama scored a great goal at Anfield.
Yes, different kind of goal though, but.
Well, I don't know. They all seem to.
Well, it was on the volley, wasn't it?
We've actually scored some great goals in front of the Kop. I think Modric scored a screamer, and Yama scored a screamer.
Van der Vaart, that was at the other end, wasn't it? When he scored that, was it that sort of loopy volley that he scored?
Yeah, can't remember which end it was. We got a horrific record at Anfield, but we do score some nice goals. Isn't that Tottenham? We do some nice things, but we'll let you beat us.
Yeah, last season being the epitome of it.
So as I said, that was the first in a little series we're trying to do, one game or one goal. So we'll get some more people on to talk about their time at Tottenham. Gentlemen, you've talked about your time again. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on, Gary. Thanks for coming on, Jake.
Having us.
Thanks for having us.
Holiday next week, Jake, or are you going to be here?
Oh, no, I'll be here.
You'll be here.
Are you going to be here?
I'll be here.
Right, yes.
Yeah, I'll be here. Gents, again, thank you for coming on. We will be back next week, and up the Spurs.